Hello, 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 and welcome to today's episode of Her Version. This podcast is dedicated to sharing stories of struggle to triumph, a platform that allows individuals to tell their truth in order to inspire and uplift others. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria. If you are new to this podcast, make sure you follow, like, subscribe, and share. Let's jump right in. All right. Thank you for joining us today for this episode of Her Version. The Her Version platform is built on storytelling and the understanding that many times our greatest learning experiences come from listening to other people's stories. Today, I am speaking with an amazing woman named Nicole. Nicole is here today to talk about the importance of healing our inner child, how to recognize if you are repeating taught toxic behaviors, and the value of finding your power despite your past. Welcome, Nicole.
Thank you for having me, Sabrina. I was over here dancing to your intro. That music is so dope. I was like, this is awesome. And thank you for having me. I'm so excited to get to share this time and space with you because we absolutely learn through other people's stories, and humans are innately storytellers. That's how we've always carried information through time, traditionally before there's written word. So getting to heal and learn with each other is so important. So thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you. And I so appreciate the ladies that I encounter that understand that, like yourself, and are willing to put yourself in your story and be, vulnerable and allow people to learn from you what you've gone through. So I so appreciate that. How was your week? How is everything? How's life?
It's good. Thank you for asking. I'm up visiting my parents. I'm back in Washington State where I grew up, and have just really been soaking in that time. I haven't spent this much time back with my family since I moved out when I was like 18, and I'm now 37, almost 38. So it's been cool to see how much I've changed and grown and how different my relationship is with my parents, and and getting to explore that healing experience too. So yeah, it's been great. I'm looking forward to the holidays. And how is your week going? How is everything going for you?
That's good. Girl, I'm always got my hands in something. There's
Yeah,
always something going on over here.
same.
But all good stuff. All good stuff. The Her Version platform is growing great. I just launched my first set of journals on Amazon that I've been, talking about on my
Awesome.
my platform. A lot of them are normal journals, and then I also have abuse journals because I also work in the narcissistic abuse arena. So I put out an entire fleet of abuse journals that are disguised as regular journals. They just look like regular plain journals that aren't gonna, cause anyone to notice them.
Yeah,
But then inside there's prompts to be able to kind of track and trend what these women are going through.
that's
Secretly.
amazing.
Yeah. So I'm
That's
really
amazing.
excited about it. I'm excited about the response that I've been getting. So it's been cool. But I would love to jump into you and your story. One of the things that I would love to do is if we could kind of back up and talk a little bit about your early years, childhood into kind of early teens and stuff like that, and kind of the stuff that you went through, endured, and that kind of shaped you, as you went along. Do you mind sharing that with us?
I would love to share it with you. And I know you probably have this on your channel too, but just trigger warnings of like, I went through a lot, and I share it from a place of like, I'm not going to go into like super fine details on certain things. However, I feel that in sharing my story and the things that I've processed and healed, that it can show people what is possible on the other side of doing this kind of work, of doing the inner work, and really reclaiming your connection to your body and your voice, and having healing relationships. Sometimes there can be a lot of healing I believe all healing is through relationships. So
I agree.
yeah. So with that being said, you know, to we have time, so I'll go ahead and start where I started. And I was actually conceived as a rape baby. And so it was non-consensual. It was between my parents. However, my mom had just had a baby. My brother and I are 11 months apart. So it was just in saying that that happens in relationships too. So there's like so many things to unpack with that. And so that kind of just gives a foreshadowing of the pregnancy. So there was a lot of stress and do I keep this baby or not? That was going on for my mom at that time. And this is all from what she has told me. So, you know, I'm just can only go off of that as well. However, when my mom left my father, and it was kind of like get away as you can, and almost like an escaping kind of a situation. So there was a lot of verbal, emotional abuse happening between her and my father. He is a Vietnam vet and was a pilot in the Green Beret,
Yeah.
and experienced, witnessed, and did horrific things. And so there's a lot of PTSD, a lot of, I'm sure, regrets and horrors that he has endured and has to live with. And so I did not grow up with my real father. I actually didn't meet him until I was 33. And in person, we started talking, I think when I was like 12 is when I first started really like having interaction with him. However, with that being said, my mother remarried for the first time. I forget how old I was. I think I was around 3 or 4-ish and when she remarried. And my first stepfather was emotionally abusive. The first and only dog I've ever had as a puppy died because it didn't get certain shots. There's like certain things with puppies, like if you don't get shots at a certain time, or like there's something happened and it didn't survive. And when it passed away, I was in the garage with it when it died, and I was like, you know,
How old were you?
5 or 6, and I went into the house and he was watching TV, and I was like, Patches just died, and he was like, he laughed. He started maniacally laughing. It was like, oh, he's like, you and your your mom and stuff, and it was like it was traumatic for anyone, and it's abusive, right? So that's like emotionally abusive, and he's also there were instances where he locked us out of the house. So I remember one time they had a sliding glass door in their main bedroom, and he had locked us out of the house. And I was like banging on the windows, crying, like, let us in. I just want to go to bed in my, go to sleep in my room. And he would laugh. It was like this weird, like laughing he would do. And so we'd have to go stay at a hotel. And so it was like this chronic things that, at the time, I didn't understand that he wasn't my real dad. It's like, I know that it was talked about, but I didn't understand it. And it wasn't until I was actually 28 years old that I was doing some really heavy, deep emotional, like hypnotherapy and body processing, that I had remembered being molested by him. And it was weird because the memory flashbacks that I had were so visceral and real, and I can't unknow or unsee those things, but because it was so traumatic at the time, I had repressed them because I was so young. And when they divorced, I was, I think 6 or 7, and I saw him once afterwards. He had a new girlfriend who had a daughter, and we met at like a Chuck E. Cheese. It was like some, or McDonald's or something like that. And I was in the play area with his girlfriend's daughter, and he's like, this is your new sister. And I remember pushing her down the slide because I was so angry and confused.
Yeah.
And I never saw him again. And my mother remarried when I was 10 to my now stepfather. They've been married for almost 27 years now. And what I experienced from early childhood was a lot of emotional abandonment. there was a lot of high functioning addiction and alcoholism in my family in general. And so it kind of played this interesting thing where I didn't identify as someone who had trauma until I knew what trauma actually was. Because when I thought of trauma, I thought of my real father. I'm like, he's got trauma. He was, like dropping Agent Orange in Vietnam and like doing crazy, like that's trauma. However, when I started going to therapy and doing the inner child work and all of these different unpacking, I like to call it this unpacking of this compounded grief that I had, I started to understand how my coping mechanisms as a child to survive the emotional abandonment, the physical abandonment, and some of the narcissistic traits that people in my family had, that was, I think, more due to addiction and alcoholism versus being a full-blown narcissist. There's narcissistic traits. That the coping that I did growing up was to hide. I shut down my voice. I was very shy. Even though I had this other like rebellion side. So it's like, I would either be really shy, not talk, not really speak up, just trying to not be seen, not to rock the boat, just to try and like make it through. And then there's this other side that's like the rebellion, like go fuck yourself. I'm going to say what I want, so it's like, I had these like two very noticeable, or to me, I remember feeling very much like one or the other in a lot of ways. But yeah, so as I went into, as a teenager, I started smoking weed, and it's interesting because I always did it for fun. For me, it was like, I at the time had a lot of anxiety, but I didn't actually know that I had anxiety. I just knew that I just wanted to take the edge off, kind of a thing. And for me, that was by hanging out with friends, having fun, not being at home, like trying to process and just like feel normal or feel good. And so I, at like 14, I started experimenting with weed and alcohol. I was doing mushrooms and LSD, but it was in the context of like parties. Like I wanted to be where the party was. And that was kind of normalized in some ways in my family, where drinking and having parties and like that kind of happy hour mentality was very normal. And so for me, I thought I was just having fun. Whereas like my peers and their parents were like, Nicole is going to be a drug addict and, like all these things. And so I grew up in a really small town. My graduating high school class was 284 people, and there's one high school in my town.
Wow.
And you pretty much went to school from kindergarten through high school with like kind of the same people the entire time. And there's a lot. There was, I was doing things that I thought were fun. I didn't see them as like addiction at the time. I didn't feel that was it for me. Even like I smoked cigarettes, all these things that I've since quit. And it never really felt like an addiction to me. It more felt like seeking something different, having fun, finding like where I fit in, kind of a thing. And so over the course of that, I also put myself in really crappy situations, right? So whether that was like drinking and driving, or for me, especially in my teenage years and early 20s, I definitely used a lot of alcohol. And again, that's kind of more what's normalized in our society, right?
Yeah,
even as
100%.
like early adults. And so I, every weekend would go like binge drink at a kegger or like, a friend's house party or whatever. And because I grew up in a small town, and because my older brother, who's like an Irish twin, right? He's 11 months older than I am. He has been in and out of drugs, alcohol, juvie, prison, jail since the age of 13. So he's now, 38. He's a year older than I am. So it's like, he's still in that pattern. And I'll talk more about what that was like too, growing up with someone that was like very much an addict in the household, that like you just never knew like when they were going to snap or have an outburst, or if they were on something. And so that was like a whole different dynamic too, because as siblings, you're kind of like, this is my person, like my safe place kind of. And when they aren't safe, and you already kind of don't feel safe in different dynamics, where it's just a weird situation that causes a lot of trauma for people, and they don't understand it as trauma because it was just what they know. It's just what they grew up with.
Exactly.
So as I went on through high school, in a small town, there's a lot of rumors and gossip, and I had girls calling me a slut before I had sex, and I'd walk down the halls and they'd like push me against the locker and be like, "You're a slut." And I had a girl hawk a loogie in one of my iced coffees one time when I went through a drive-through, and so many things. And so my defense for myself was to either shut down or rebel. Yeah. So I would either go home and like cry by myself, because my parents kind of were like, "Wow, that's just kids," like they really like it. There was a big disconnect with that. And or I would go to school and fight back. Like I would get like push other girls or like get really like defensive. And so there was later in life a lot of sister wounding that I had to like really work through around trusting women again, around just because I've seen and been on both sides of that, where when girls date crappy guys and the guys are doing really like uncool stuff, but the woman that they kiss or like have the thing with are the ones that get blamed, kind of a thing. It makes me think of like the Monica Lewinsky trials where like she's like 23, she fell in love with her boss, and like she was depicted and publicly shamed for something. Like for her was just like, I fell in love with this person, and their marriage was in a weird place, so it's like this whole dynamic, especially in small towns. So I numbed out. I used drink, the partying, like the party girl, the smoking weed. Like I would smoke weed before I went to school, and just so I would go, because I had so much anxiety, but didn't know how to name it at the time. But it was the only way I could make myself go for, I think it was like my sophomore year. And at the time I was playing volleyball my freshman year. And I ended up quitting because the coach was just a nightmare. And all the girls on the team were friends with these other girls that were like, "You're a slut." So like, it was just not a conducive relationship. And my coach saw my brother and I waiting for to be picked up after school one day. And she pulled me into the locker room like that week or the next week. And she's like, "I'm really concerned with the people you hang out with." And I was like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "I saw you with that Brandon kid." I'm like, "He's my brother." Like, I can't really help that. So, and then it was just all like stuff like that, just all the time, that instead of an adult figure talking to me and trying to figure out what is going on with you, like what's really happening for you, it was just like, "You're a bad kid," or "You need to get over it," or "You just need to deal," because that's a lie. It was like, and I think we know more now. Yeah. Because at that time, for my parents or my grandparents, like we're just having different conversations on what is healthy for emotions, for children, for the parent dynamic. And so there's no blame around any of these things. It was just what I experienced. And they weren't taught in the ways that I have been taught, and what I've learned from that experience. So yeah, when I was going through high school, I got my license taken away. I used to have police officers follow me home through town because my brother had such a bad reputation that they would literally, I would be followed by the police just driving around my town. And one of the times, a guy that I was dating called me, and he's like, "Hey," he's like, "I need to get back to my house. He the place he was at was downtown, and he lives out like in the country, and he's like, please, I just need a ride, just like come get me. And I like had to beg my parents because they were like, no, like tell him to figure it out. And I was like, literally it's going to take me a half an hour, like I'm just going to give him a ride home. And so I went to his friend's house to pick him up, and it almost felt like I got set up. I don't know, it's like a weird situation. So I picked him up. He's like, I have a case of beer, like I came over here to get a case of beer, and then I'm going back. And I was like, okay, we'll put it in my trunk. And I had a Blazer, or like a Bronco. So it's like kind of like an open back, and there's like windows in the back.
Fun car.
Yeah. It's funny because my parents wanted to get me like a cute little like Honda or something. I was like, I want a truck, or like I want a Bronco, because I loved camping and like going and like taking piloting my friends and going somewhere kind of a thing. So it was total gas hog, but
yeah,
but I loved it.
I wanted a Bronco for my very first car, and my parents wouldn't let me because of the gas.
Yeah,
no way.
Yeah, my parents were kind of like, really, Nicole? And I was like, just let me get it. So
that's cool.
Yeah. So I went and picked him up and put the beer in the back. I like put something over it because I was, like 16 or whatever at the time. And there was a police car like across the street. They followed us all the way through town, and where the high school is at is like halfway between where that house was and where I lived at the time. And I slowed down to take a left turn, and the police had been following me, and they pulled me over, and they're like, you were going below the speed limit, so we pulled you over. And I was like, I was slowing down to turn. They're like, well, we're gonna have to search your car, which is illegal. This is illegal. And because they probably saw my boyfriend at the time put the beer in the bag. So then it was like this whole thing where the boyfriend wouldn't admit it was his, obviously, because he didn't want to get in trouble.
Yeah.
And because the car was mine, I couldn't say it was like my parents' beer or something, like it was. So I got I got a minor in possession for that. And my parents were like, because of my older siblings having drug and alcohol issues and being in and out of like lawyers and stuff like that, they were like, well, like you made a mistake, so we're not getting you a lawyer for this. And it was just a shitty situation and learning experience. But it was just kind of like these things that kept building off of each other. And there were many other times where I was drinking and driving and like got a minor in consumption and different things. So I'm not saying like I was, like always completely innocent or whatever. I was definitely doing, like minor activities that if you were an adult wouldn't be seen as a big deal, but because you're under, 21. Yeah. Which is a whole other conversation around why and when it's legal for people to like be experimenting with alcohol or weed or different things versus at what age you become mature enough to do the things. So anyway, so alongside of that, because of the town I grew up in, a very small town, I was very close with a few friends of mine that passed away at a young age. And when I was 17, one of my really good friends committed suicide. And it was, when something like that happens, especially in small towns, it's like a big shock to the community. And when I was 21, my best friend, like my childhood best friend, committed suicide. And it completely changed. It rocked my world. And that's really, his death is actually the catalyst for me doing therapy. It was like when he passed away, I was managing and working at a coffee stand at the time. And one of my regulars is a therapist, and he would always come in and get his double tall mocha with skim milk. I remember his drink, but he'd come in and he was asking me what I was doing for the holidays. And I was telling him, I'm going home with my family, and we were talking, and it came out that, that year prior, like I had experienced this suicide, and he was just like, have you talked about it to anybody? And I was like, it was the first time someone had actually asked me, have you processed this?
Yeah.
And I just started bawling. It was like 6 a.m. and I was just like, no. And he was like, you know what? He was like, why don't we schedule some times for you to come in and you just bring me my mocha and we'll talk. And it was the first time I got to unpack
Wow.
grief.
Wow.
And it makes me tear up talking about it. And it's funny because I was actually just talking with my mom this morning about my friend Isaac that passed away. And I was like, it's crazy because I still miss him. Like, it's just a piece, becomes a piece of your fabric.
Yeah.
Something about grief, and when we go through things, is you can grieve and you can process it, but it almost like, I don't want to say dents or tarnishes you, but it flavors and becomes a part of the fabric of who you are and your life experiences.
Absolutely.
And what's interesting about like this, when I first started going to therapy, is I used to bite my nails, and I hadn't bitten my nails since I was a kid. And after that session, I hadn't bitten my nails in years. And I caught myself like at the end, like the last like thing, I was like, oh my God, I literally haven't bitten my nails in years. And I just was like going for it. And so it's just interesting how our body, it's like just in this process of learning how our body has memories and holds memories, and the way that I repressed the abuse that I experienced as a child.
Yeah.
Where our bodies really hold on to things until we are able to process them.
100%.
Until we are able to unpack them. And there's such wisdom in that, in ways where, you know, had I been cognitive now to what was happening to me then in the way that I know now, it could have potentially been even more traumatic because I was more aware of what was happening at the time, versus disassociating and repressing all of that stuff. So I know I just said a lot, so I kind of want to like just wrap it into also like the work that I do now. When I was a teenager, I convinced my parents to put me through massage school instead of a 4-year college.
Wow.
I am a weird person, but like I was a weird kid. I was like, nope, this is like, I was like, this is what I want to do. And it did not make any kind of logical sense, right? Like most parents, people are like, you need to go to college and like do the thing. And I was like, nope, I know I want to go to massage school. And that experience, I would say, is my first in reconnecting with my body. And actually, like, I had experienced so much abandonment externally and internally. I had abandoned myself. Like every time I dated guys who were not interested in me, I was abandoning myself. Every time I didn't speak my truth, I was abandoning myself. And in going through massage school, and having the safe, healthy touch and going through the body work of it, it was like this coming home to my body. And so over the last 19 years in the work that I've done in my own healing process and the education and the trainings and the certifications, because I've done a ton of them, has been this process of, for me, myself coming home to my truth, to my body, to healing what is healthy. What is healthy for me, and where did I learn these things that weren't healthy, and where do I get to say no to those and not pass those on to when I have kids, or even to the relationships that I build from here on out. So it's been a really bittersweet or like beautiful pain kind of journey around just how complex life is and how we really get to decide what things mean about us or to us from our experiences, and we get to decide that.
Yeah. Absolutely. You mentioned a little bit there dating.
Mm-hmm.
Do you mind talking a little bit about your early dating and how those relationships kind of really guided you into self-development?
For sure. Yeah. Oh man. So because I had a lot of daddy issues and a lot of abandonment, emotional especially, but also physical, I would fantasize and idealize the perfect partner, the perfect man. I still have to catch myself when I do this, because I didn't ever really have like a really healthy, like I will say with my grandpa, I had a very like a very loving, fun, like he felt like my father because he was always around and always there. Um, and so there was a part of me when I was dating, especially from a young age, like I remember being boy crazy at a very young age. But I would like infatuate with like one of my brother's best friends. I was like in love with, like every time they'd come visit, I'd be like, oh my God, it's, you know, this person's coming, and like get so excited. But he was like 100% not interested in me at all, you know? So I would idealize and fantasize and infatuate with this same abandonment, like that same abandonment, lack of interest, non-emotional piece.
Yeah.
But I wasn't connecting the dots. So I was like, this person's so attractive and they're so smart and I love talking to them, but they weren't interested in me, but that felt normal.
Wow.
So I didn't realize it until much later, where I was unconsciously replaying the abandonment patterns that felt normal to my nervous system and my body.
Yeah.
For a very long time, like all through my 20s as well, where I would chase a guy who gave me breadcrumbs.
Mm-hmm.
And then if and when we did get into an actual relationship versus just like hanging out or hooking up or whatever, it would be me trying to be perfect. If I could just be better, if I could just not be jealous or, you know, like whatever the thing was,
Mm-hmm.
I always thought it was my fault that they cheated or that they weren't interested, or I internalize and personalize things where it was like, no, this person's just not interested, or they're just not a healthy person, or those things. So for a long time, in my teenage years and in my 20s, I would infatuate and chase almost like that same feeling of like, if I could have just been better, then maybe my dad would have stayed. If I could have just been, you know, like that, it was that mirroring those same kinds of dynamics. And because there was like, you know, I don't want to say there wasn't love in my home growing up, but it wasn't in the way that I needed and wanted. It felt like a very big disconnect, and it felt like sometimes, but not all the time. And so what I've learned over the years in dating is, what do I want? What do I actually want to feel? And how do I actually want to be treated by someone? And then working on the allowing and the deserving pieces of those around. It wasn't even so much knowing I was worthy of it. It was just, I hadn't experienced a healthy relationship ever. Yeah. And so I didn't know. Yeah. I didn't know that I could ask for certain things. I didn't know that there were certain things that I could be like, actually, that doesn't work for me. And if you want to be in partnership, then we get to meet each other in the middle. Yeah. It was always me overgiving and trying to be like, oh, well, I must have caused this. And that's also like when you grow up with addiction, parents that have addiction or alcoholism, that codependency that gets created in relationship of like, oh, it's my fault. It's my fault that they didn't love me enough. It's my fault that they have this addiction. It's my fault that they're not getting better. Because when you're that young, you don't have the cognitive brain yet to understand me versus them. And so we're like little sponges, and all you know is it's my fault, or I caused this. So that would be like the biggest learning curves, I think, for me in dating. And also just noticing through different breakups or different things where when I am grasping at or chasing, whether it's a man, money, job, something, that's a flag for me to pause and pull back and be like, what am I actually trying to get here? Yeah. And that was a big change for me in relationships. And I actually, I dated someone in my 20s that I should have never, I knew I wasn't going to marry. I knew I shouldn't have dated. But at the time I was just trying to prove that I could be in a relationship because I'd never been in a long-standing relationship. And, you know, my aunt would always be like, oh, Nicole's just a lesbian, or like, just because I'd never been in a relationship. And I was like, if I was a lesbian, I'd tell you guys, because I have, you know, like, I don't have judgments on that. And so I like was trying to make this relationship with this guy work, and he was addicted to porn and was like very insensitive to, like, he would flirt with other women in front of me, and then just like justified of just being like, you're being crazy or you're being jealous. And like, at the time I was like, yeah, he's right, I am being that way, instead of being like, wow, this is like a two-way conversation around, hey, like, if someone came to me and said, you know, like, oh, I feel like you're flirting and it's making me uncomfortable, it would be a conversation, be like, oh, that was not my intention, like, let's talk about it, versus being like, you're crazy, you're jealous, like, I don't know. So it's been through those relationships too, where I could see the contrast and the learning experience of like, oh, actually, this isn't how people do relationships, and it's not how I have to do it. So it's been a lot of trial and error in the sense of learning those things along the way. And the other 5-year relationship I had, from like the end of my 20s, early 30s, there was definitely a lot of unprocessed trauma on his side. And so he wasn't, I don't think, a full-blown narcissist, but absolutely had narcissistic traits of like gaslighting, manipulating. And I really believe that unprocessed, unhealed trauma does cause narcissistic traits in people. And so again, it would be the like him not coming home until 4 a.m. because he's out drinking after work, and or wouldn't come home at all. And I'd be like, this doesn't work for me. And then him being like, you just don't trust me.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd come home smelling like perfume, or like different things where it was just like, at the end of the day, it wasn't feeling good to me.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I had to catch myself and be like, I'm trying to justify like, and again, make myself wrong for something that actions that are happening that I'm not okay with. And so, yeah, there's just been a lot of learning how to communicate and validate myself in regards to when someone is in a trauma response, and understanding that I don't have to internalize that or take it personally. And I also get to choose whether or not it is a healthy situation for me to be in or not. And that's with any relationship, whether it's with my parents or my siblings or partner or friends or anything, is like, does this innately feel good to me? And also being aware that like, I also have trauma responses and I get triggered about stuff. And sometimes I need to take a pause and take a beat and be like, is this really a problem, or am I projecting past stuff onto this person? Because that's happened too. Like, you know, I hate admitting this, but it's just something that I know about myself, is I do have jealousy that stems from abandonment. Mm-hmm. So it's not even necessarily that I'm jealous of like a person that someone's talking to. It's more the feeling like they're going to fall in love and leave me.
Yeah.
But knowing that about myself is working with that of like, in the moment being like, are they actually flirting, or am I getting triggered? Mm-hmm. Second is, if I do tell them I'm uncomfortable, how are they meeting me with that and working with me to heal that?
Absolutely.
Versus shaming me for a very painful, multiple experiences of abandonment that I've had from childhood. And then also, the more I've been able to pause and really sit with like, okay, the little one in me is afraid that she's going to be left and hurt. Yeah. And that's actually what's happening here. Getting to pause and hold that space for myself, and comforting her of like, hey, even if like worst case scenario, that is what happens, we're going to be okay. And I've got you, changed everything for me.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I do want to acknowledge Blue Vibe. She's commented quite a few times here while you've been talking.
Oh, awesome.
And she shed a few tears for you while you were, you know, talking about some of the more personal things earlier on. But she's got some experience with narcissistic abuse herself. So she agreed with you here as far as, you know, trauma and inward and outward with narcissism. Mm-hmm. As far as, your healing, what age do you think I know you said you went to therapy early on. What age was that where you kind of like had a little bit of a switch where you're like, oh my gosh, there's a little bit of a different way of doing this? How old were you when that happened?
Yeah. I would say it's sprinkled in, like, for sure when I went through massage school, that I think was like the catalyst for me, in coming home to my body, in learning about healing modalities. That's when I was exposed to, Reiki and yoga and shadow work and behavioral therapies and all different kinds of, like extra credit stuff that we could do in massage school, because I did a year-long program. And I would say that was definitely the beginning of that path. And the therapy was the first time to really start unpacking that stuff. So I think the massage school and even when I was a teenager and doing mushrooms and LSD and having those kinds of experiences, it changed my perspective, or like, I feel like it kind of allowed me to pull back into more of the observer self, just rather than just being in this like, oh, this is just me. It popped me more into like an observer, like being able to observe my thoughts and emotions in a different way that I know that my peers at that age were not experiencing, because they were not naive, but they were allowed to be young, and they weren't experiencing the same things that I was. And so that's something about trauma too, is when people are like, oh, you're like an old soul. It's like, no, that's just my trauma, because I had to become hyper vigilant and aware at a much younger age in order to survive.
Yeah.
So it's just a different experience. And so I would say that, like, experimenting with those hallucinogenics, even though for me at the time it was just like for fun and I didn't know the actual medicinal benefits that we're learning a lot more about now, in alternative health and plant medicine stuff in the research now. But I would say that was some of it. The body work, absolutely another piece. The therapy at 21 was starting to unpack. Since then, I've done behavioral study training with Dr. Martini. I have done Barbara Brennan healing, shadow work stuff with a healer in Hawaii. That was at like, I think it was like 25 or 26. I think it was 26 when I started that school. And then, just reading a ton of books. I've done other trainings for yoga. I've done over 800 hours of teacher trainings that are trauma-informed trainings. I studied with Martha Beck and doing her life coaching program, which is also very body-based. And she uses a lot of Byron Katie's work of thought work and different things. So really any training, book, workshop, certification I could get my hands on, I was doing, like, and a lot of it, the catalyst for it was a breakup, or a lot of through my 20s was me trying to understand why I couldn't hold down a relationship or get the guy that I wanted, or those kinds of things led me to the healing work.
Got it.
So a lot of that I'm very grateful for, because it was a catalyst for me to my own healing, where it was like, I couldn't have known any differently unless I experienced the pain, because that pain usually is a catalyst for people to their own healing.
Exactly. I know you've mentioned shadow work quite a bit. For those listening now live and on the replay, can you kind of talk about what shadow work is, and then also how it helps?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was introduced into shadow work when I was in Hawaii and studying with the Barbara Brennan healer. Her name's Rui Ryborn. She's awesome. And we read some of the books from like Ava Pericos, and essentially what shadow work is taking these parts of ourselves that we would rather not have, whether that's the jealousy or the anger or the pain or the grief, and getting to almost like you're separating it from yourself to look at it and to understand it and to hold it and honor it as a part of you and your experience and your being.
Okay.
So rather than trying to numb out or repress or push away or avoid or disassociate or say, I'm not that way, or I hate that part of myself, you're actually taking it and looking at it, and you're like shining the light on the shadow kind of a thing, and reintegrating this piece of yourself. So it's really getting into the depths of the dark side of ourselves that is just the reality of being human. We have a duality in our experience with, and so, you know, and to add to this, I think there's a piece where I know when I first started going into healing work, I was like, I'm going to do this thing and then I'm going to be healed and I'm never going to have the inner critic anymore and I'm never going to feel pain again. Like I really, like I went into it like, you know, I'm like A+ student. When I put my mind to something, I'm like, I'm going to do this thing and I'm never going to feel like shit again. And it's going to be amazing. And I'm going to be healed and like all the things. But, and it was almost like a devastating piece for me when I found out that that's like not how it works because I was like, I had experienced so much grief and so much heartbreak. Yeah. That I didn't, and with like my best friend passing away when I was 21, I was like, I don't want to feel that. But it was not wanting to feel a part of me and my own human experience.
Oh, I love that.
And so that's where the shadow work is like, how can I hold this piece of me, even if it's like the most outrageous, painful thing, and not relive it, but accept that it is an experience. And there's just, I know how complex this is, especially when there's been really traumatic things and painful things that have happened to people. And it's not to say that you need to forgive. I'm not a big believer that you have to forgive in order to heal. Sometimes not forgiving, you know, is like a path of like healing for people. And so it's more of like letting go of like having to forgive or having to be at peace with what happened. It's letting that be in the past, but like loving on and healing and accepting where you are in those pieces of yourself now, and not trying to change them, not trying to forgive them, not trying to judge it, but just being like, yeah, this part of myself experienced pain and it is now trying to protect me from something. It's now the piece of me that tries to keep me safe. It's now the piece of me that gives me more discernment. So I don't just keep chasing guys or recreating these things. So the more that you can really look at those shadow pieces of yourself, it dismantles and starts to unpack the unconscious parts that are operating our system. Because when you're not aware that it's running the show, so this is like a lot of the unconscious, you know, pieces of ourselves, we'll keep recreating the same patterns because we don't know that piece that's like, oh, I'm doing this because I'm actually really terrified. I'm doing this because I'm actually in pain. And coming back to that piece, when I understood that my jealousy stemmed from the abandonment, the fear of being left and not loved. And then it's like, I can have compassion for that part of myself versus being like, fuck, I hate myself for this. I hate that I do this. And so it changes the way we are in relationship with ourselves. And when we can have more connection, compassion, and intimacy with ourselves, it absolutely changes how we show up and relate to the world.
Absolutely. That's awesome. As far as emotional healing, we hear about that a lot. What does that look like to you? And have you been able to heal? Well, we already kind of answered that, but have you been able to heal over the years?
Oh my gosh. This is really the core of my work, is emotional healing. I'm a Pisces. I have a stellium in Scorpio in my sign. Like I have very deep waters and emotions. And for the longest time, it felt like my Achilles heel. I hated how emotional I was. And I also was brought up in a family where I was too sensitive. I was too emotional. And that was always the feedback that I got. So I internalized a lot of that. And so what emotional healing is to me is allowing your emotions to be feelings that are feedback. So just as we can observe our thoughts and our thoughts are not us, our emotions are also not us in the sense of like our soul and our like true self, but our emotions are feedback, and they are sensory tool that our body uses to let us know if something is safe, not safe, good, bad, all the ways our brain categorizes things. And so when we can learn how to be like, oh, this feeling doesn't feel good to me, it is feedback for you to make a decision or to make a choice or to change something. And you get to, I don't like to say like control your feelings, because they're moving, they're fluid, they are emotion, they are in motion. So when we try to control feelings or emotions is when they get stuck or repressed, like right when we're trying to compartmentalize or not feel or push this thing down, or I'll come back to that when I can deal with it kind of thing. It causes dis-ease in the body, it causes constriction, it causes tightness, numbing, stiffening, different things like that. And the emotional healing aspect is so much of the shadow work of like, can I, at the bottom of the barrel, sit with this pain, this anger, this uncomfortable feeling without judging it, without trying to like become it and be in the abyss and not have control over it and think I have no control and like getting swept away. Can I be with it and look at and feel into what it is communicating to me so that I can like learn to move with it? And that's a lot of the work that I do is teaching people how to actually experience, to actually be in their body, because most of us live in our heads in Western society. And then learning how to move with this emotion. So it's not you, but it is being expressed and it's giving you feedback. So what is it telling you? How does it want to move through your body? How can you let it move instead of trying to hold it? And then there's all this like, oh, like I just got to keep the lid on or else like shit's going to hit the fan kind of a thing. And I do want to say to this too, like so many people are so afraid of their own emotions, the negative emotions, that they avoid therapy. They avoid feeling anything because it's too much or all of these things. And it's something that's been taught to us is to not feel, to not talk about your feelings. Like, girls or guys don't cry, like all these things. It's like, you're a human being and your feelings are sensations. They are no different than taste and touch and smell and sight. They are sensations. Your body is giving you feedback around a situation. And so the more that we can normalize that, there's so much healing that comes with that, where the intimacy that gets created between humans around sitting with each other in the good and the bad, in the pain, and not trying to like fix it or tell someone that they shouldn't feel this way or they shouldn't cry or things are going to get better or like all those things. It's like, can you witness someone, your own emotions and someone else's, and hold that space for you to just unpack those things. And it's not to wallow in it. It's not to like be complaining or gossiping or any of those things. It's more of like, can we acknowledge it for the raw truth of what it is, without a story, without a judgment, all these things. And then from there, how to move with it as a piece of who you are. And through that process, it dissolves it and dismantles it. It takes the charge out of it. So when you're not afraid of something, there's not as like, if you're not afraid to feel angry, if you're not afraid to feel grief, it moves differently through your body because you're not resisting it. You're not trying to push it away. You're not trying to hold it somewhere. It's like you understand that like, oh, I'm feeling this thing and I'm going to love on it and hold it and like let it be here. And how differently it just in how we relate to other humans, of like, you can then see like, oh, this person's dealing with this thing. So when you see a child act out, or even a lot of the stuff we see in news when people are doing this crazy shit and you're like, I can't, these people are crazy. And it's like, no, they're fucking traumatized and they are in pain. And it's not to excuse bad behavior, but it also is like, when we can have those kinds of conversations around can we get this person the help that they actually need to unpack the pain versus vilifying people? It's a game changer as far as a
100%.
human experience and how we relate to each other.
I would like to touch a little bit more on what you're saying. I 100% agree with everything you're saying. I myself am a very emotional person and grew up in a home where it wasn't appreciated. And thus the relationships I had after that treated me the same exact way, as far as being emotional means you're weak. Being emotional is annoying. It's a waste of time. It's dramatic. Here she goes again.
Yeah.
So I totally 100% get that. And I am now in a space where I am 90% more comfortable with the fact that at any given moment, anything can trigger me to get emotional, to cry, whether I'm talking about my own story or listening to somebody else's story. It used to be that I'd be ashamed, I'd apologize. And the fact that you're talking about anger, I'm now comfortable with the fact that sometimes I am angry and sometimes I am a little more dramatic when I am angry than other times.
Yeah.
But with that, I would like to get your opinion, because this platform was predominantly based on narcissism. So when I first started this platform, it was filled with narcissistic stories, and it has thus, since then expanded into a lot more. In your opinion, how does one know when anger is being used abusively versus we are allowed to be angry and have anger?
That's a great question.
Because that can be confusing for an empath hearing that, because it's like, okay, well then I need to be respectful of the fact that he or she flies off the handle. So I need to be respectful of that. But where's the line in that?
So
this is your opinion.
This is such a great question. It's such a good question. So this has been a big one for me because anger wasn't safe. And when I was younger, whether that's with my first stepdad, when he got angry, he would lock us out of the house. Like we get locked out of the house, or he would spank us, and like it was terrifying. And later with my brother and his chaotic like outbursts of like you just never knew when it was going to happen. And the thing about anger, whether it is ourselves or someone else, is you can experience anger in healthy ways. And expressing anger in a healthy way does not attack other people. So for the empaths that are like, oh, this person flies off the handle and I just need to be loving, and because it's I feel like a lot of empaths justify bad behavior because they can relate or have compassion to the trauma or the hurts that the narcissist or like that person has. But the problem with that, it's not necessarily a problem, it's just kind of like the muddy waters that can happen with that, is they are then justifying being abused, whether it's verbally or emotionally, and again internalizing and recreating the same cycle that they probably grew up with. So healthy anger looks like the person who's getting triggered and angry being like, I need to pause, I'm getting upset and I don't want to take it out on you, so I need to step away. I will come back. I'm not leaving you. I'm not abandoning you. Whatever that verbiage is for their partner. Around like, I need to go process this, and in a way that they're not going to say things that they don't mean and attack their partner, because that happens when people are angry. They usually say things they don't mean and or justify like really harsh things, being like, well, that's how I feel and I'm right because I'm righteous in my rage, kind of a thing. So for that person, whether it's yourself or the partner, to step away and go punch some pillows, go chop some wood, go for a run, and then knowing that I get to be angry, like I'm upset about this thing, and the core of anger is fire and change. So when people are angry, it gives you the fuel for change. So when someone is angry, it's because a boundary has been crossed, because they feel violated, or something has happened that their body is lighting up to defend itself, right? So like anytime somebody's angry, it's because there's an injustice, there's a boundary, there's something that's happened. So again, knowing your triggers of like this thing, I know this thing can piss me off, or my partner does this thing and it fucking pisses me off, right? It's a human experience. And normalizing and being okay with like, do I feel like anger is safe for me, or to when I'm in the room with someone else that's angry, and looking at your own reactions to anger and what feels safe, what doesn't. Having communication around the anger of like, I'm feeling angry right now. I don't want to say something that is going to hurt you or our relationship or us. So I need to step away and take a beat, take a breath, process. And the biggest thing with anger is words and physical. So anger can cause, physical when somebody doesn't know how to process their own anger and they punch a wall or a person or something, and or verbal attacking, right? There's also stonewalling, where someone just won't talk to you to teach you a lesson, and they won't talk to you for 3 days at a time. So that they're pissed. I've experienced that in a relationship, and it was the most like traumatic thing for me, of being like, why can't we just talk about it? Like, so for people, especially empaths, to not internalize someone else's behavior or to justify it, is how can we learn how, for both of us, to express anger in a healthy way. And it's a building process, and it's a learning experience, and people aren't going to get it right away. They're, I think anytime there's a rupture in a relationship, when there's a discommunication or something happens where there's a breakdown, it's an opportunity to build up stronger, because it breaks down this thing that wasn't working and allows you to come back and communicate in a way where it can come back stronger. I know anytime I've had a rupture with best friends or family or different things, and we can actually talk about and talk through what happened, I feel closer to them. Like, oh, we both brought our truth to the table, and we can actually build from that, versus staying in this like reactive ping-pongy state. So yeah, with anger, I would say like really understanding how you yourself feel with anger. Like, is it safe? Is it not? Do I feel comfortable being angry without retaliating on someone else or internalizing it? Because when we internalize grief, it can shut us down, or anger, it can turn into grief and like internalize it. So, and then learning how to also, on the other side, if someone is like angry and starts attacking you, because some people, that's just their pattern, because that's what they learn, to also be like, I want to have this conversation with you, but right now I'm feeling triggered and I want to take time away. So it's also giving yourself the space. If someone is like really charged and they want to have that conversation and they're lit up, and you are wanting to stay neutral and be in more of like a I want to talk through this with you, versus like coming at each other, is to give yourself the space to like honor and validate your own needs of like, I want to talk about this with you, but I want us both to be in a space where we can hear each other, or whatever that conversation looks like. But anger is really powerful when used correctly. It creates movements. It creates human rights in ways of like standing in that truth of like, this isn't okay, and I'm not okay with this happening. So again, just like learning the pieces of anger around it is an activator. It is wanting to create change. It is wanting to justify or stand for what's right, or if a boundary's been crossed. And then getting to bring awareness around, am I just being triggered and this anger is a release or a way that I just pop off? Is this anger because I need to speak up for myself and set a boundary that's been crossed? Or have I been violated and I want justice or like something to change? It's really getting into this play of like, what is it for me? And if someone else is angry, not just justifying, oh, it's just because they're angry or those kinds of things, and saying like, hey, I don't accept this kind of behavior to be talked to this way. So I want us both to take a minute and come back and talk about this when we both can hear each other and actually like talk about the problem, versus like attack the other person or blame the person for something.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. As far as your life, what lessons do you think people can learn from your life and hearing your story?
Oh man, so many. So so many things. I used to have a huge fear of public speaking. And a lot of it was, I know you would never know, right? A lot of it was because of the trauma I experienced. But at the time, I wasn't like, oh, I can't speak in front of people and I'm terrified because of my trauma. I was just having these like palms were sweaty, my body would be shaking, my voice would close up, I get like tunnel vision. I would be like, feel like I was going to pass out. And my body was like, not safe, like all the things. And so whether it is the fear of public speaking, whether it is feeling really insecure and like you can't have the partner of your dreams because of your trauma, or like you don't feel good enough, or wanting to, I've traveled the world and lived in amazing places and have done that frequently throughout my adult life. You literally can have and do anything that you want in your life, and your past, your trauma does not define you. And the more you can be so connected and compassionate with all of you and all the pieces of you and continue to do better when you know better, literally to never give up on your dreams and like the big desires that aren't like the rational things that are safe and the white picket fence and all the things that people in life tell you to do. And you are going to fail. You are going to fall. And every time you stand back up after those times just attributes to everything that you get to create for yourself and what you desire, and to really, really own the beauty and the fact that you matter, and that the fact that you are here now and what your ancestors and your genetics and the cellular pieces for you specifically of the one sperm and the one egg for you to be here right now is a miracle. And as long as you have the air in your lungs, that you are here for a reason and you matter and you have a specific medicine and message and purpose here, even if you don't know what that is yet, or maybe you never figure it out, but getting to be curious and explore that, and really getting to be with every aspect of you. It's all possible for you. So I just, whoever needs to hear that, but I know that I've been in places in my life when like, I really was like, I don't know if it's ever going to get better again. Like I've gone through depressions and whether it takes 6 months or a year, a couple of years, just like, keep loving on yourself and surround yourself with people who get you and support you and aren't going to judge you for where you're at now, because it is one moment in time and every day is a new opportunity for things to happen and for your life to happen. So
yes. If people listening right now on live and those listening on the replay appreciated your story and the advice that you're giving here, and they wanted to reach out to you, how would someone find you?
Yeah, so my website is NicoleSyverson.com.
And what do you do? Tell us what you do.
Yeah, so I teach women, and it's funny, I attract a lot of like spiritual entrepreneurs, but I teach women how to take their life and their business to the next level through soothing their nervous system. And this is when mindset alone isn't cutting it. So for anyone that's like, I'm reading the books and I'm doing these things mentally, but your physical body is like with the fear of public speaking, or like things are shutting down or getting triggered, and you're like, I'm going to do the thing, but then I get anxious and I stop, or I'm trying to feel more confident in relationships, but then I go back to this pattern. I work with women on helping them come home to their body and be with these bigger emotions so that they can regulate their nervous system and their body and their emotions so that they can take bold action and have the courage to do the big things that you have to do in order to create the desires and the life and the things that you want. So that is how I work with women. I have a retreat that I do online. So it's 5 consecutive days. You can do it whether you're traveling or at home. And it's a guided, as if you were going to a retreat. It's a 5-day experience that is an alchemy, a transformation experience that builds upon itself. So it's all about sitting with your inner child, healing your emotions, reconnecting to your sensuality, finding your voice and activating your voice, and giving you tools and practices that you can use for life to help regulate your inner world so that you can have more feeling like you can control more on the outer world. And I also do one-to-one coaching. I have a few spots open right now, actually. And I have a 6-month program for unleashing her. And it's all about unleashing your truth, reconnecting to your sensuality, and unlocking your voice, and really getting you into your truth and that like bodacious boldness that is inside of you that you just need to unlock and let out. So
That is so cool. That's so cool. So if someone wanted to find you, what's your website or URL or handle?
Yeah. So all of my handles are at Nicole_Syverson, and my website is NicoleSyverson.com.
Beautiful. Oh, easy.
Yeah.
It's not always that easy. So her name is on top of her face there.
Mm-hmm.
So NicoleSyverson.com.
Yep. .com.
Beautiful. If you wanted to reach out and connect with her, and I'm sure all her social media is on that website. I do want to ask one last question before we wrap up here. What is your advice, or what advice would you give to a female who's struggling with her self-worth right now?
That's such a good question. There's so many things I would want to say to her. Your self-worth is not based on anything outside of you. And the more that you can come home to yourself and really, like, I feel like self-worth has so many, it's so complex around whether it's things you've experienced in the past or you've done in the past, to know that you're still worthy of love, you're still worthy of healthy relationships, and you really do get to have whatever the fuck you want in your life. So coming back to the sense of surrounding yourself with people that love and adore you and that are going to help you remember who you are and that you are worthy. Reading, whether that's reading, workshops, mentors, coaches, YouTubes, whatever the thing is to focus on how you want to feel about yourself, and having compassion for the pieces of you, that inner critic and those kinds of things, and knowing that those aren't the truth. The truth is that you are worthy, and it's just remembering that and not basing it off of anything outside of yourself or source or creator or God or whatever that internal is, or if you're atheist, just your soul. But yeah, and really just getting to remember that that you are, and trusting that even if you don't know how that looks or feels yet, that borrowing other people who you see as seeing them as like, oh, well, she's worthy, and just getting to soak that in and being like, if she can do it, so can I. So
Exactly. That's great. Do you have any closing thoughts before I close up here?
Yeah, well, I also, I do have a YouTube channel as well. So if people, it's again under Nicole Syverson, but I have a ton of interviews, trainings, different things on there. If for people that want free access or just to kind of fill out and check out the kind of work that I do. And I also want to thank you so much for having me and creating this space to have these kinds of conversations, because the more that we can get them out there and normalize this, there's just so much more healing and empowerment for women, especially for women that maybe right now they like really don't know how their life could change or be different, and they have to wait for circumstances to change because of money or the situation or kids or different things. So really hounding home this piece of like, even if right now it seems like the furthest thing from what your reality is now, that it is possible, and to just take care of yourself in such a way that you're just honoring yourself. And yeah, Sabrina, thank you so much for having me on. It's been a really great conversation.
Of course. Thank you. And I so appreciate you being a part of the community and being willing to share your story and your insights. So much amazing information you gave today. So I so appreciate that. And I know that anyone listening now or listening on the replay is definitely going to get some hope and some encouragement from that. So I appreciate that. For those of you listening on the replay at this moment, because we're just about to jump off, we do, or I do, and I'm sure Nicole would be more than happy to go back every once in a while and review comments and stuff on these videos. So even if you are watching this on the replay, anything that you do comment or that you need some help with, you can reach out to Nicole at the handles that she gave, or you can comment right here on these videos underneath, and we are tagged, and we will make sure to get back to you in a timely manner. So thank you so much for joining us here on Her Version. If you have an amazing story to share of struggle to triumph, be sure to reach out to me here or at herversion.life. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria, and I'm so grateful to be here sharing a platform that allows people to share their truth and inspire others, do something awesome